is 9 o'clock and
Get started.
We don't have anybody on.
Okay.
This is the first meeting of this committee this year, so there isn't a chair, or vice chair for the committee. So you're asked to amongst yourselves determine who the chair, vice chair will be.
Okay, I nominate Naveed
All right.
as chair.
And we have Director Giardini as vice chair.
Thank you.
All right, that was easy. Item 2. I have review of the 22 consumer confidence report.
Yeah, so I put this on the agenda because we just released the 2022 Consumer Confidence Report. This is an item that's done annually. It's a requirement for all water providers to do so. I just pulled it up. I thought I would ask, so we're gonna, everybody's utility bill this week, when it comes to the mail, will include like a little notice that this report's available online with a link to it, or they can request a hard copy to be mailed to them, or they can pick one up here. We don't get a lot of requests for these. I don't think a lot of people probably go online and look at it. But because of our next topic, I thought it was important to kind of talk about some of the constituents that are found in our water supplies. So you are aware of what we're starting with. So from that point of view, the water that we supply our residents and businesses is probably that when it gets to their tap, that's the best it's going to be. And whatever happens in a home or a business tends to make the water quality worse with certain particular constituents. So I'm just
Constituents or contaminants?
well, they're not really contaminants. I'll call them constituents or water quality. They're components of the water.
Okay.
So there's a couple of them here that I think are worth kind of noting. Anyway, I mean, we're happy to answer questions that you have about this. Most of the results are not that dissimilar from prior years. And they're based on testing that we've either done in 2022 or in some cases over the prior few years. Some constituents, I guess if there are if there was a heavy, someone might call that a contaminant if there was too much of it, are not required to be taken, like lead and copper are on a 3-year cycle. So the results for lead and copper were last taken in 2020. But we get so one couple of these that we're going to pick up on the next topic is sodium. There's sodium in our water, about 90 parts per million on average.
But that's way in the acceptable range.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. Just noting it.
Okay.
Okay, so we also have fairly hard water. A lot of people use a water softener here. That's another component when we get to the next topic. The reason they use water softeners because our source water we provide is fairly hard. And water softeners are another contributor of some constituents of concern on the wastewater side. Again, I'm skipping through here. Justin, let me know. Just jump in if you see something here that you want to point out. But
and Jeff, we're going through the CCR in connection with later we're going to be discussing some of the challenges we have. Excuse me, in wastewater and meeting current permit limitations.
yes.
And possibly future.
So we've got some chlorides here, see here, about 90 parts. Sulfates, these are all components of typically what would show up in these, in what you'll hear TDS or total dissolved solids. This is another area of concern. So we delivering water last year of about 700 TDS. That's the source water. That's what we provide the customer. So keep that number in mind as we get to the, before we get to the wastewater side. I'm just without pulling up. I think those are the ones that that were most important. TDS being that number of 700. Gotta keep that in mind. If you have more questions about this, we're happy to answer them. This again is something that's provided, it's done annually. We get a handful of questions a year about it. It's kind of about this, and it doesn't change much from year to year.
So just when I looked at this, all of our ranges were acceptable ranges. We weren't exceeding anything. So the range of detections is going to change through the next.
Not on the water side of the
On the wastewater.
wastewater side.
Oh.
So, yeah, there is, right. We're providing a safe water supply. But even some of these standards, you know, even though we're within the range, are still concerning to some residents, like how hard the water is. It's a secondary standard or a preference, right? It's not a health or safety issue, but a preference issue. And that's why so many folks, you know, go with a water softener or something like that to improve water quality inside the home. A lot of houses have reverse osmosis systems for drinking water to remove some of the constituents. All good?
Oh, good.
Okay. That's all I have on the first item for that item.
Any questions, comments? You good, Justin?
Oh,
Okay,
shoot, I did it again.
all right. That being said, the next item is Meadowbrook permit application. So staff will discuss the general permit application requirements from the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board for the Meadowbrook treatment plant with the committee.
So to provide just a little bit of background on this, you may remember that we advised the board back in January after we had the issue at the Selby wastewater plant where the river rose and came into the plant, and then it overtook a couple of our ponds. That was a reported condition. And it brought the attention of the regional board back on the district, even though we were not cited as for a violation. Because of that condition, we hadn't operated the plant or the facility outside the parameters of the discharge permit, but nonetheless that occurred, and that created some heightened awareness that led to a site visit in February, early February, Justin?
That's correct.
Yeah, early February. And when they were here, the folks from the regional board, they advised Justin that you should expect to hear from us formally about a couple of issues. The first was a facility inspection report that was, you know, there were some suggestions, but the inspection report basically said the plant's running in accordance with the permit. That followed with this letter, and I'll bring up below, yeah, right here, that we received a couple weeks ago, well, maybe 3 weeks ago now. In the letter is a real polite invitation to apply for some new and much more stringent discharge requirements under the general permit. And so we provide the letter and you're welcome to read it. We have a deadline to submit by July 3rd. And Justin, you've done this before. Yes. Okay, we're gonna be able to meet that deadline in terms of our notification to the.
Yeah, if I could just add a few things here. So the general permit was adopted Central Coast Region 2020. I started to be involved with the enrollment for Atascadero in about 2 years ago, 2021. And there was interest in standardizing permits. You know, there's 43 approximately dischargers to land, and I believe that's just over 100,000. That's just talking about the large domestic dischargers to land, which is over 100,000 gallons. And so they wanted to kind of standardize, makes it possibly easier for them to keep track of everybody. If by at least type of treatment plan, there was a standard general permit for each of these dischargers. And so they prioritized this list. And they started going after, let's say in the first year, they went after their first dozen. And that was explained by them. And so here we are a couple years later, and we've received this notice to start this enrollment. This enrollment can last up to 2 years. It's a rather lengthy process, and there's a number of reports that go along with the initial application. One of which is a climate, I believe it's called the climate control plan, and that can be laborious to make good on and turn it into regional water control board and be approved. So this process is lengthy. As far as the July 3rd, Jeff, recently we've reached out to the Regional Water Control Board and we've asked for an extension. Noting that our district engineer is ready to issue perhaps a plant audit. And the information, the analysis that would be obtained during that plant audit would be very helpful in working through some of the application forms. Those application forms by and large are noting what you would be in compliance with, what you would be able to comply with in the new general permit effluent limitations, what you would be able to comply with, what you may not be able to comply with. You're saying up front during that application process. For instance, the constituents BOD, TSS, maybe you're going to be able to make good on those. You're going to be able to comply with those with the new general permit limitations. But perhaps nitrogen, you're going to have difficulty with the type of system, wastewater system, a treatment system that you have, being ours is a pond. And so we have not received word back yet as to if we're going to be granted an extension for that application period, at least the notice of intent to comply with the general permit. But it seemed very positive. It seemed like the water board absolutely is going to give us some breathing room. They thought it would be very beneficial to have some analysis performed with the existing treatment plant and looking at these future effluent discharge limitations and if we're going to be able to comply in these certain areas, meet these certain constituent limitations. Yeah, after the 2 years, I'll just keep going, after the 2-year enrollment period, you can, if you're not going to be able to meet certain effluent discharge limitations.
Let me pull up those, we.
Just mine's up.
Oh, yeah, I want to just, it's on that hard drive.
It's on the desktop, so if you minus out everything. And then minus out.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and then it's right there.
So Justin's report that we provided to you ahead of time included kind of a little table that we merged into this little document so everybody could see it all at once. And which when he talks about these new discharge requirements, those are shown both in the hard copy that you're the item that you have, and then on this comparison. So the current discharge means and max from Justin's report are here, and then the new discharge limits are shown in this new general permit discharge limits. They don't yet apply to us, are shown in this final column.
As you can see, they're much more restrictive. And the way the treatment plant has been operating well, it seems I came on at a good time where things were starting to stabilize. And so BOD, as far as BOD and TSS are concerned, they've been fairly low. I mean, really, the treatment plant has been operating really well and with BOD and TSS removal. We are operating the treatment plant right currently where we're using some of the storage ponds by design. Storage ponds as active treatment ponds, but as far as BOD and TSS are concerned, we're doing really well. And what I mean by that is we could have a BOD right now of maybe 10 milligrams per liter. You can see that the mean there is 50. Likewise, we could have a TSS right around the same. We could, I mean, it's And that goes up and down. Maybe we could have a TSS up to 20 or we could have one at 5. And unfortunately, even when we did the pilot study last summer, we had exceptionally low TSS where it was difficult to really gauge, you know, how effective necessarily these types of equipment. So we're doing really good with BOD TSS. In my working with my past employer, BOD and TSS in some of those application forms were something that right off the bat, I said we could comply with. Settable solids really wasn't an issue. Total dissolved solids, sodium and chloride were issues. It's a profound, the max currently for Meadowbrook is a 1450. And the new general permit for TDS would be cut virtually in half. And the source water.
Yeah, keep in mind, that's why we wanted to go for these numbers in our source water. We're delivering water on average of 701 TDS. And what ends up happening, all that happens in the wastewater system is we just make this worse, right? People put, you know, they wash their hair with shampoo, they use soap in the dishwasher, and so the TDS level just rises through the system, and so yeah, there's we're not receiving water quality at the wastewater plant that's below 730 TDS. And we talked about sodium and chloride levels that were already in excess of these limitations in our source water. So anyway, that's why I wanted to point those things out. We also asked Rob to attend today because you might remember that when we first brought the East Side Force Main project online, we brought over, you know, we almost tripled our wastewater flows back about 4 years ago. We ran into some challenges at the plant and we worked with Rob to make some on his advice, make some operational changes, including putting that previous designated storage pond as a treatment pond and added some more aeration and changed the configuration of the aerators. And the results have been good, right? We've been able to, after a few years, get the, you know, have much more consistent discharge, meeting our limits, not running into the same kind of challenges. And we've then since tried to tackle some of the industrial dischargers that we believe were causing some of those challenges as well. So sort of from both sides. So Rob's here and he's had experience working with other facilities similar to ours and that are going along this same process. So the purpose of kind of today's discussion isn't to present you with our proposed solution, but just to discuss some of the challenges that are ahead. What is our plant likely to be able to achieve, even if we have fully optimized it? Or added technologies to it, and what of these constituents are we unlikely to be able to achieve, or constituent levels are we unlikely to be able to achieve the type of technology and the type of wastewater plant that we have.
So then does the regional board fine us, or do they say you have to improve your system?
So they say you have to meet these limits. And then if you don't, eventually, after a series of nasty letters, they can fine you and even issue cease and desist orders and stop it, prevent the, they have a lot of tools available to them. I mean, for example, I worked at an agency that was out of compliance to the point where they prohibited the city from issuing building permits until the wastewater plant was able to become in compliance. So they have a lot of tools available. That's way down the road. You know, after some time, and Rob and Justin can talk about the enforcement, the current enforcement strategy, but we're not fearful of, I mean, right now, I'm not sitting here fearful of fines. We have to develop a plan to meet these effluent requirements.
And we'll be part of this process. There is time allotted. After working through that 2-year enrollment, just prior to that, there's a recommendation to request that time schedule order. That TSO buys you, and they'll loosely say somewhere around 5 years, but there may not even be necessarily a particular day, a time, a year that expires, but that I think if you're making you know, progress with your plans, design, construction, what have you, in meeting the general permit discharge limitations, then then, you know, you're allotted that time. I did want to note that although, the general permit discharge limitations in some cases are half the value or worse. I want to say this last year, we did not meet our TDS, our total dissolved solids, so that was a violation. I think the mean we had just over 1,300 milligrams per liter. We did not meet our total nitrogen limit. We were in ballpark around 28 milligrams per liter. And so, so we're having issues complying, you know, meeting these discharge requirements as they stand right now.
Well, let's talk about just what our plant treats and what it doesn't treat at all. So for example, our plant, we've talked to the committee and the board about some of the challenges we had with BOD in particular, when we thought we were getting some really heavy dischargers and how the plant is capable of treating those and why it was important to reduce the BOD coming into the plant so that we weren't, you know, wiping out our treatment system during certain times of the year and overnight. And our plant is treating the suspended solids in a much better way than it was previously. And that's what Justin reflected on. But we don't have nothing at our wastewater plant is treating total dissolved solids. So that whatever we're getting in is essentially going out.
And to treat TDS, chloride and sodium, it's very expensive.
Is that
Reverse osmosis is virtually the only treatment to remove, lower the TDS, chloride and sodium. In 2 years ago, working with the water board and Atascadero, they had no problem with Atascadero building a reverse osmosis system on the back of their treatment plant to the tune of $10 to $15 million. My conversations with them over this last weekend were that although they were going to still issue them these lowered discharge limitations for TDS, sodium and chloride, that they have there's no wanting to, they do not want communities to be building reverse osmosis systems on the back end of their wastewater treatment plants to discharge right back into the ground. You know, I hope that holds. I hope that just, you know, that's good news because it's incredibly expensive to build these and operate. And there's a lot of bypass, that brine, for instance, a lot of that nobody wants to deal with. So I'm hoping that, I mean, that little bit of information was encouraging because up until just this last weekend, I thought we were still we were still headed towards reverse osmosis to remove TDS, chloride and sodium. And I hope they're out 2 years ahead of us. They're larger than us. I mean, their treatment plant is double the size of Meadowbrook, but they are very close in proximity. Some of the groundwater basin, some of the constituents are similar. Mutual Water Company does things, you know, differently than we do. They're a private company. The wastewater treatment plant is public. It's the city of Atascadero. So, but they are out ahead of us in this by 2 years, working with the water board and their consultants. And so we can kind of track how some of their conversations that they're having as we're starting our conversations as well. Navigating the enrollment period, TSO, long range plan, all of these sorts of things. It's quite a lot, and it's been taxing. It's been very exhaustive on, you know, on all of our local communities. Region 3 is from Santa Barbara to Santa Cruz. So I mean, it's affecting everyone.
You know, the filtration system that we had that we did just for a couple of, you know, it was just a week that was a Meadowbrook. And that was like a few months ago. Does that take care of the sodium and chloride, or is it, that's just for TDS? That's
Just TS.
Yeah.
Yeah, so remember, we looked at that, the primary reason we became focused on that a few years ago was we were trying to ensure that we could percolate all of our water out at Selby for the purposes of retrieving it, and that was the primary concern, and so we were attempting to determine what treatment techniques could we add to better ensure percolation. So for the purposes of getting the water back, yeah. So maybe, I mean, Rob's kind of, maybe you can kind of talk about, you know, what are these constituents is our type of plant likely gonna be able to improve upon? And, you know, what can't we?
No, it's probably more than you ever wanted to know, but you volunteered for the facilities committee, so here it is. And it's good to be in good company. We help out many of the other local communities, and they're all dealing with the same thing. So first, just I think a little focus on the treatment technologies that you have here that most of our local pond systems have. It's a biological treatment. It depends on the growing of bacteria to consume the waste that comes in, and then the removal of those components via settling, which is what we've been doing for generations in wastewater treatment. It's all biological. Very few chemicals have to go into that process. That's what makes it cost effective. But historically, we really are focused on BOD, that's just organic matter in the waste, and suspended solids, which is another really a measure of organic matter. And once we remove that, we say the treatment plant's doing well. And your plant is doing well. Those are things that are suspended in the water. They are not necessarily dissolved salts. So fast forward to, you know, the last few years, there's an increased focus on these dissolved salts, which are just individual molecules, atoms in the water that even with perfect biological treatment, you won't remove them. The only way to do it is, as Justin said, primarily through reverse osmosis. And so even though this seems new to the district, the issue of these plants not removing these dissolved solids is not new. And that's why the regional board, you know, the regional board has this mandate of non-degradation. You know, they have these objectives in each and every groundwater basin that says, this is where we want to be. And they're doing their job. So they're saying, okay, you have to meet these mandates. At the same time, they're required to be financially responsible and not requiring ridiculous treatment levels that double everybody's sewer rate. So there's a balance there. And so what they've done over the last few years is to require these municipal systems to regionalize some of these challenges. Salts, you know, we call these salts, to regionalize these challenges and require these communities to come together and say, okay, if your plants can't remove these, then how are you going to manage this issue of salt? Let's look at this holistically. You know, do we have enough water coming in from rainfall and other sources of dilution to create a condition where even though you are discharging more than these requirements, it won't result in the groundwater basin having higher and higher levels of salts. And so they had this idea that we'll have communities prepare these salt and nutrient management plans that deal with sodium, TDS, and nitrogen. And so communities begin to prepare these plans regionally, and I think the district participated in a regional plan. And so that might be an avenue to focus on, to not have to look at, you know, RO at the end of a plant. And so it's, you know, it's interesting because everyone's going to be in the same boat. Even the city of Paso, who just invested how many millions in a plant that will remove nitrogen, they also can't remove salt from that plant. So they're going to be in the same boat. Tascadero, same. City of San Luis Obispo, same. Even the very large dischargers are all in the same boat. So there'll be an opportunity to speak regionally about the issue of salt. I did want to talk about nitrogen too, because that's in a different category. But for salt, you're gonna be joining a larger discussion.
Question.
Yeah.
So if everybody's exceeding their salt requirements, so the regional plan is then the purpose of it is just to say none of us could meet this? Or because then we're really not coming up with a solution for it? I mean, the benefit of the regional plan is you're talking to everybody else, right? And that you're all working on this together, but if Paso's exceeding it, we're exceeding it, Atascadero's exceeding it, San Luis is exceeding it, there's nobody below the level that would offset all those exceeded rates, so kind of where are we going with this, I guess, it's just a discussion for regional water to understand, hey, we can't meet this.
That's a very, that's a good comment. You know, some communities are focused on, okay, if we look at all the sources of water that contribute to the groundwater basin, obviously rainfall, recharge from river systems. If you look at all those sources of low TDS, fresh water coming in, and you look at, which for many of these plants, they're treating less and less water over time as people conserve. You know, their discharge volumes are going down, and of course, their concentrations are going up. And these discharges are relatively small compared to natural rainfall and other sources of recharge. Maybe the net result, look at that as a system, is that you're still going to meet the objectives, but the discharges individually will not meet the objectives. But looked at as a system, you might. The assimilative capacity of this basin to get sources of recharge and sources of discharge, maybe it all comes out in the wash where the regional board gets what they want. But that's again, that's a discussion. Like in the Valley, they have these very large organizations where everyone's funding, you know, a centralized salts management organization that's doing these studies. And you just pay a fee and you participate because each discharger can't meet it. Separate from nitrogen, we'll talk about that in a second.
So we took and through the East Side Force Main brought back our sewage that was going to Paso. So according, if I'm understanding everything correctly, our discharge, the water that we deliver to our residents is good. It's the discharge that by the time we add shampoo and deodorants and dishwasher stuff becomes high. So then we're taking our discharge and now we're treating it ourselves. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the discharge that we're bringing back to pick up and reuse as water is going in at a higher concentration of constituents.
So that's.
Is that gonna get, so it sounds like we're damaging we're, from a simple-minded person's view, is that we're putting in higher constituents over here, trying to filter it out while we pull it up here, but it's gonna be higher, and in the long run, might even send these up more. Am I making sense?
So yeah, if it were a totally closed system, then yeah, I would agree that every time you worsen the water and then we're reusing it as a source water, it would decline. But when we discharge our wastewater out at the Selby site, it's intermixing with all the water, all the other water supplies that are in the underflow of the river. And so when we withdraw it, we're withdrawing just a fraction, a tiny fraction of what we've put in the ground, right? Our water has commingled and diluted with all that other water supply when we bring it back up. The river water, actually, that water is not really what's contributing to our high TDS source water. It's our groundwater supply from the deeper basin. That's where we find the higher TDS water in this area. So that's part of our argument, is we're not worsening, we're discharging, let's say today, 400,000 gallons of treated wastewater a day, and it's commingling with X amount of water that's going by. We're just 1%, 2% of the water that is going through that area. Maybe in a real dry year, we're more than that, but we're just a minor player in the overall system. And so that's an argument that why these limits shouldn't apply. But I think Justin's point was, we're not seeing that in the regulation, we're seeing that maybe in practice. And it's still concerning, because if these limits apply, then someday somebody down the road can say, time to fix it.
I think it's interesting down south, they're a little ahead of us. You know, you have like in Ventura, you have regional brine management, you have a brine line that goes through these inland areas. And people are starting to get very serious about salts treatment, and some of their treatment processes. But here, I think I would hope generations out, and that the focus on salts is going to be regional. I think Jeff said it well. There's plenty of dilution coming in from rivers and rainfall. You may ultimately be required to do more extensive groundwater monitoring around your discharge. I think that's something that many of us are seeing the regional board ask for, more formal plan of detailed monitoring of groundwater conditions around your discharge. You do have some monitoring wells now, but some additional may be required. I think it's good to just talk briefly about nitrogen. That is one of those constituents that can be treated biologically. Total nitrogen can be removed biologically. The city of Paso just invested however many tens of millions to do that in their treatment process. City of San Luis Obispo just invested tens of millions, actually 100 million, to do that in their treatment process. Community of Los Osos, same thing. Those are some of the only plants, those three, that have been upgraded to remove nitrogen to the levels that are referenced here. Pond systems, you'll get some removal, but generally are not designed to remove total nitrogen to the level of 10. And so this is something that, again, they may be able to look at results in your groundwater monitoring wells and look at some of the diluting water that comes in. But nitrogen is one to keep an eye on, because some local plants the larger ones have been asked to upgrade to remove nitrogen, and a pond system, won't do it.
Ron, can you just describe the technology that's used, that we would have to modify the plan?
Sure. So, the more advanced treatment plants pond systems are great in that they're very simple. They have few moving parts. The bacteria are very spread out within the pond environment. And these plants that remove nitrogen tend to use the more advanced technologies. We call it activated sludge, where you grow a crop of bacteria that's very intense, very concentrated. I mean, it looks like soup, brown soup. And at those very high levels of bacterial action, you can convert all the naturally occurring ammonia and everything that comes organically out of our bodies. You can convert that to nitrogen forms that eventually we make nitrogen gas out of it. And but it requires that activated sludge, and there's many different versions of that. Most systems like yours that end up having to remove nitrogen end up going with an activated sludge technology that takes advantage of the ponds that you have and sort of builds that more intense environment in the pond. The system that was put in Nipomo is an example of that. They went from a pond to what they call BioLac, and it's a proprietary technology that's activated sludge. It's the same stuff. That plant can remove nitrogen when it's required to do so. And so there's a number of vendors who have come in and gotten good at retrofitting ponds to make them into these nitrogen removing systems. But they're more expensive, they're more operator intensive. You go and compare the amount of operators that Los Osos has to here at Templeton. It's a different scale, of effort to keep these plants running. And so that's something to be looked at and thought about.
For sure. And one of the things that Rob mentioned that he said, well, that the regional board is supposed to be sensitive and we're not supposed to double sewer rates. And I just that's not my observation. Doubling the sewer rates has been like nothing for the regional board's requirements and to finance the kinds of improvements that might be required in the long run. We've seen, like in the case of Los Osos, of course, they didn't have a sewer plant to begin with,
Right.
but their sewer rates were shockingly high to most of the residents there when they came online. And other agencies have seen rates, needing to double to finance the cost of those improvements. And I've not witnessed the regional board being particularly sensitive to that. Maybe if they need to go up 5 or 10 times, they would feel so. But this group is the financial impacts to the customer are not front and center.
Yeah, I agree. Only on salts have they been more understanding. On nitrogen, less understanding. And they have.
So you said, you mentioned that Napomo has done the technique where they have the super concentrated sludge. Is Napomo about the same size treatment plant, or is it?
Twice, double,
Twice.
yeah.
And then what was the cost of that?
They spent over around 10 million, I think. Don't quote me on that, it could be 15, but it's in that range. They had a larger customer base.
So you ultimately thinking that we need to go that route then in 7-8 years?
I think long-term, that's why this master plan, I think, is so important. I mean, this is a great time to do this in the context of looking at this permit upgrade. You try to keep that capital off the table as long as you can, but ultimately, I think everybody's gonna be facing nitrogen removal of some kind. Particularly for a percolating discharger. That would be my best guess.
So you probably also heard us mention, we've never had to remove sludge from our plant. Going into these new types of, or upgraded types of treatment, we all of a sudden become. We're gonna be working with sludge in a very different way. It's another complication, another cost. It's just something that we're not really dealing with right now.
Yeah,
But these activated sludge plants are gonna require sludge management.
well said, Jeff. Once you activate that sludge, now it's not let it ferment in the bottom of the pond for 30 years. It's an everyday thing. Pile of sludge.
So is there anything you can do to educate the public so that our waste discharge is doesn't have as many constituents? Is there products that we could tell them to use, or things that we could do to tell them to do to not, so that they could help out, even if it's a little bit at their end? I mean, I don't know, but I use dishwasher soap, I use shampoo, I use deodorant. We all do, right? I never think about, what I'm doing when I take a shower and wash it down the drain. So is there things that the community could do that we should be educating them on that might help, even if it's a little bit, at least it's some?
Yeah, I mean, the exchange style softeners are better. They're better.
That will help with like TDS and sodium.
Well,
Yeah,
you're not gonna change nitrogen. Nitrogen is naturally occurring. They can eat less bacon, but can't eat less bacon.
To get
that's an unreasonable request.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
Process.
softeners.
Yeah, water softeners are, so, if in fact we were able to come up with ways to solve everything and we got, within a sliver of this TDS, that would be a factor. The reality is we're providing water before people do something to it at 700 TDS.
right.
There's no chance we're gonna get it to 730 at the wastewater.
But still, I think, there are people out there like
Sure,
myself
Right, who
who would,
maybe
okay,
make decisions accordingly.
would make decisions according, and so it may not be everybody, it may be a small percentage,
There-
but you always feel better when you're helping out.
Yeah, there are. So like a lot of people don't realize that sodiums come from a lot of sodiums come from cleaning products and these kinds of things. Now, homeowners, maybe they can make some changes that make a difference. The big issues on the industrial users and large industrial users can, with cleaning processes and whatnot, if we can get them off of sodium-based cleaners to some like a potassium cleaner, that can make a dent in our sodium. Can make a real difference. But yeah, but customers can, we can educate them on choices that they make. But ultimately, almost everything we do at home with our water that goes down the drain is adding to this TDS in one way, shape or form.
So like with water softener, so instead of using sodium base, if you use a potassium base, that's gonna make a difference, right?
It'll help on your sodium.
It'll help on the sodium.
Not on your TDS levels.
Yeah. So
Potassium is still a source of TDS.
But those are so expensive.
They're very expensive.
It's like $6 versus $30 per bag.
And I don't know if an exchange style is available here in Templeton. I mean, over on the coast, you have Colligan, but I'm not sure if they come out here.
Yeah.
But
Where they cook some, yeah.
exchange is better. I would also argue that your purchase of Nasi water, when taken as a whole system, lowers regional TDS. And I think that's an argument you should and would make. Look at that as a blended.
So like diluted right at
Yeah,
the end.
yeah.
Put in some Nazi
So
water.
if, a lot of agencies have looked at, if TDS becomes the issue, the constituent of concern, looked at treating not the wastewater, but the incoming water supply. And that would be, under certain circumstances, a viable option. In our case, though, we have a decentralized water production. We've got wells throughout the community. They don't all pump water to a centralized location for treatment. If they had, it might make sense to treat that water, reduce the need for folks to add water softeners, and then you'd have huge water coming into the wastewater plant. But that'd be very tricky, not impossible, but very tricky and expensive here because of the decentralized nature of our water system. So so it's all very connected and interesting, but I think it's important, I think, for you to just to understand the source water we're working with today and how in some cases it's really at or exceeding
Yes.
the expected discharge water. So that the expectation is in some cases to have the water better quality than the water we're providing as potable water.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No.
So the purpose of this was really to introduce you to this, this was coming. We were doing everything we could to stay out of the radar of the regional board and maybe buy another year or 2 or 3, or just let, make sure they tackled those other plants first. They have some discretion in what order this is done. And I'm afraid the storm event on January 9th, brought us back into the limelight a little bit. And here we are. Of course, it might have come next week anyway. I don't know. We just don't know. So that's where we are. We will keep this a lot of work to come. We'll keep you and the board updated on our process, and there will be engagement with the regional board about these activities, and we will we'll do everything we can to provide the flexibility that's necessary, but ultimately there will nearly certainly need to be significant changes to the treatment plant. All those changes come with capital costs and higher operating costs.
So this sounds like a weird question, but the Creekside property, who is it, sewer or water that owns that property?
Water.
Water, that's what I thought, okay. And is there land there that we could use for some of this treatment, or does it have to be over here near our facilities?
Well, it has to be somewhere between where we collect the wastewater and where we're discharging it. We have room at the wastewater plant. Space is not the problem. That's actually a real, as it turns out, probably a real. We had all that space because our wastewater plant was originally not a surface discharger, but a spray field, or was surface, but it wasn't done like it is now. Is we have that property for that reason, and that in the long term, that's going to provide a lot of flexibility about how we can go about modifying the plant, because we have room. That's a real advantage.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Anything else we want to cover on that?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll be seeing you.
Much more.
Sorry, Rob, are you with John Wallace?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Appreciate it.
All right, next item, update on water and wastewater operations. Is that?
We just want to provide a verbal update on a few things. I'm totally good on time, so I'm not that worried, but I did want to make sure we talk about just the events of May and what happened. So Justin, kind of, you want to start there or wherever you'd like?
Yeah, we can, there was something, I think provided for plats 4 and 2, but we can start with wastewater treatment plant first and talk about how challenging this last winter has been to deal with the wet weather. Incredible wet weather we've been dealing with and how that has affected our Sylvie's been a real challenge to discharge our effluent to in that the groundwater, the river came up, the groundwater came up, and there were several weeks through this winter where we were unable to discharge to Sylvie because the groundwater was so high. And so we have storage for that in those events. We're able to store that water in Meadowbrook for a period of time. Thank goodness. And so as soon as we could, we were taking that measurement to groundwater on a daily basis through in the wintertime. And it subsided. It subsided, and there were times where it was 4 foot. The measurement was 4 foot. At 8 foot, we can't discharge to Selby. It's in our discharge requirements right now. And so we did get to 8 foot. You could think of the month of April as being right around 9 foot. So we're starting to it's starting to lower by another foot. As we sit right now, it's holding right around 10. To give you an idea, the shallowest, the highest, the groundwater measurement got last year, we were to 12 foot. So the highest the groundwater came was within 12 foot. This year, there were times where we were 4, 8. We started discharging again, tracking it through April, 9. We're at 10 right now. And so to Jeff's point here in the beginning of May, we saw an increased flow. We had just subsided to maybe the low 400,000 gallons a day coming into the treatment plant from all that wet weather. We had and that's kind of typical. That's kind of normal. That would be normal for us. And then boom, we went right back up for, just plus or minus 2 weeks. Elevated again, around 600,000 plus gallons. And so we spent time trying to find out where this was coming from because we only found it at the west side lifts. We found it first, those elevated flows at our west side lift station through that flow meter, and then the treatment plant. And it was evident in the treatment plant that we were getting increased flows. You could just observe the elevation of those ponds came right back up, and this is kind of like insult to injury type of thing, but we were around the clock trying to operate Selby so that we could try and discharge as much as possible. While we have these incredible flows from, January to now kind of coming through the treatment plant. This recent anomaly, this increased flow that we got. Jeff, I don't know if you want to talk about that more specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's some good news. Good news side is one, we managed the wet weather flows and the lack of discharging to the point where we did not have to use the spray field at all. All of this water was percolated at Selby and will be able to be retrieved as a water supply. That's great, and it gives us a great level of confidence that even through this record-breaking year, we were able to achieve that. And so Justin and I were in regular conversation about, okay, what point are we going to be able to get Selby back, in a condition where we can provide proper maintenance and get Nazi back on? And I went out there with Justin, I think it was on May 12th. And he's like, things are not looking better. He was like, I thought we'd be like, we're headed for a June 1 target date, but it's gotten worse on that. It's unbelievable, actually. We had these high flows, and so, and then, so that was on May 12th. On May 16th, Justin reported that the high flows subsided. And so that was like over a long weekend, and we had not identified the source of the high flows, but Justin had narrowed it down to the west side of Highway 101. Then when we did our meter reading last week, Twin Cities Community Hospital's meter reading figures were off the charts. They have 2 accounts. Both of them used about 5 times the amount of water that they had used in April. And of course, they're one of the high water users to begin with. So when you take your highest water user and you increase that times 5, and you have all this wastewater coming in, it was pretty easy for us to assign that period of high flows to Twin Cities. So I've been in really regular communication with them over since the beginning of the week, really, since we were able to pinpoint this. And I believe, based on what we've researched, that they had an interior problem, significant problem, for about 13 days. That used about 2.5 million gallons, about 200,000 gallons extra a day. This is on top of what they would have normally used. They still haven't finalized. I got information yesterday that they had found another, because even since Thursday and Friday, their water usage had obviously backed down since May 16th. We're confident in that because the wastewater flows have declined. But their reads from the meter readings date to yesterday or Tuesday, when we updated them, we're still about double what they were on a daily basis, or average per day, from April. So they discovered a leak yesterday that was being repaired. I don't know, until we figure out what was the cause of that really peak condition, which could have been related to whatever was repaired yesterday. We won't know. Some of the challenges that we have is that meter, or their meters, don't store data. You get a meter read when you read the meter. You don't know what happened the day before. And we have a small number of the newest residential meters have that data collection capability. And so we could pinpoint it better if it had that style of meter, but this is a big meter, does not have that technology. And even our meter reading technology wouldn't alert us to that if it occurs. You can only kind of go back and grab the data after the fact, based on what we do for meter reading. So we've been in that's caused one, really through ours. I mean, it had a huge impact. We went from like normal operations to storm levels of water coming in for 13 sustained days. And it really, we actually,
A leak did they have?
well,
I'm
a big one.
imagine. I mean, how could there be water pressure left in that building with that kind of leak?
Well, they have a big meter. They have a 4-inch water service. So the larger the service, the more of the water they can lose. Once we figure out what this was, it'll be easier to report on what was going on at Twin Cities. But we were bringing in water that would have exceeded our treatment capability, our permitted treatment capability. We're a 600,000 gallon plant. For those 13 days, we brought in more than 600,000 gallons every day. It's pretty remarkable. I think if this happens again, we know where to start a little quicker. But it was a very significant event. I don't recall in my time here anything quite like that happening that was within the system. So a very significant event. It's their water and wastewater bill will go up. It's going up about $40,000 for the month of May. Really, all that in about 2 weeks. So they're not very happy about that. But it absolutely, if it's that single event has caused now sort of delayed our ability to bring water levels down, coupled with all the other factors, high water and groundwater level and whatnot. and delay our ability to bring Nacimiento online. On the good news side, we've captured all that water, treated that water, probably wasn't too bad to begin with, and not the excess leak water. And then are gonna be able to percolate it, and it'll essentially be an offset of what we brought in from Nacimiento, and so it'll still provide a water supply going forward, but so that was something that was unexpected and highly unusual that happened, that's happened. I think we also wanted to touch on, I don't know what other topics, on the water side. I reported out to you that we have two wells at Platts, the deep well or the groundwater well. Has been on our watch for high arsenic. You know, we have some wells that do have high arsenic, and it hit a 10 earlier this couple months ago now. Does that sound right? 6 weeks, so sometime in April. And so it went offline. And actually, we've been retesting it.
Right.
And we got a number lower than 10, so it's back online.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. Yeah, we were doing weekly testing with two different laboratories. Weekly, and so we received a couple of 10s, but we received a 9 earlier this week, communicated back to the Department of Drinking Water, and we were able to turn that well back on.
But it would be not surprising to see it hit 10s again. These problems don't resolve themselves typically. If it does, we have limited options.
Don't we blend that?
We have the same circumstance at the Creekside site. We have the Creekside well that has arsenic levels that are higher than 10. And there we're set up to blend with the Creekside River well, which produces very low arsenic. And so we blend it to a level well below the limit of 10, cannot get to a customer until it's blended. And that's a satisfactory treatment technique. Now that you mentioned that, let me show you. Justin actually took a couple here. Is this one of them right there?
That's kind of the overview, just to give an idea. It's behind Delta Liquid.
So yeah, here's Highway 101, so yeah, Cali Propano, right? Is this location. We have two wells on this property that we call Platts. This is the deep well close to railroad tracks, and the shallow or the river well closer to the river and a little bit further south. And then Justin, I know you had a second picture too.
Yeah, there's a second picture. Is
A little more closer.
zoomed.
Close up. So here's a little bit closer. The district's had a long relationship with this property owner, and we've had multiple well sites over the years at this location. So this Platts River well has long been known as a problem for the district. One, it doesn't have electrical service to it. It was a gas pump that ran poorly when it ran. Justin, since you've been here, I'm not sure if it's ran. So that was already problematic. Two, you see how close it is to the river here? We can't run these shallow wells if they're within 250 feet.
150 feet.
150, yeah, I'm sorry, 150 feet of any surface water. And this is of course, this year the rivers ran a long time, so this is within that 150 feet. Actually, you can see the sort of riverbank is kind of up here. It's really close at this location. And so the surface water is close. So this has been a candidate for a long time to be replaced. And then recently the well casing appears to have collapsed. So we can't even airlift the water or test the water or read the well depths at this point on this well. This well needs to be abandoned and reconstructed elsewhere on the site, so that it can, one, have power, two, be far enough away from the river. And then there's some urgency now, because if we had that in an operating condition, we could operate that well in a way that would allow these two wells to blend their water before they hit the distribution system, just like we do at the Creekside site. That's a low tech, low cost method of treatment. And there's another reason why this is important. This river well, even besides that, in that our Selby discharge water and Nasi water that we discharge, we track where that water is along the river, and we go and pick it up when it's available to us, like on, not on a molecule for molecule basis, but pretty darn close, at least for tracking purposes. And oftentimes we're unable to, we don't have the demand at the specific time of year, specific month to pick it up at the Creekside site or at the Smithwell site, which are upriver or south of this location. And so we have water that goes by those locations. And oddly enough, about 3 years later, it ends up under here somewhere, theoretically. And right now, because this well's out of service, we're unable to pick that back up. It's kind of a lost supply. So there would be some advantage to us operationally to have this well functional for a number of reasons. And that's why we've programmed the replacement of this well into next year's budget, even ahead of the water master plan. But it can provide some pretty immediate benefits to the district.
Is it going to be located in the same easement so we don't have?
Well, here's where the challenges come. The district,
Why do I ask these questions?
so no, there is not an easement at this location. We don't have a signed easement where the well is today, actually. It was a subject of dispute some 10 to 15 years ago that was not resolved. And so at the time we said, look, we would be able to demonstrate a prescriptive easement if push ever came to shove. And so let's not have a fight with the property owner, just keep operating it. And that's worked. But now that it's time to replace it, since there is no easement, it can't, and we know we need to relocate it. We can't just, the last time we did a well replacement at the Bonita well site, we ran into a situation almost identical to what you just described. We were able to pick a spot on the easement about 25 feet away at the very corner, and we dug a new well without having to change the location of the easement. In this case, we need the well to be further away from the river. So we are gonna need a new easement from the property owner. The property owner, so we haven't started that process yet. But I know that it didn't go well for whatever reason a decade ago plus. I don't have firsthand I reviewed the information at the time when I first started here, because that was something that was kind of not resolved, and concluded that we didn't need to do something about it because we were able to prove prescription and nobody was kicking us off the site. And so that hasn't been a problem, but the well failed either way, and it's been just quite problematic and hasn't been used much in the last decade anyways. So, but push comes to shove, this needs to get further away. It can go here, it can go up this road, this is kind of a junkyard of this site. I wouldn't call it improvements. So we are probably fairly flexible about where it goes, but it has to be further away from the river, and we're gonna have to get an easement before we, I'm not gonna drill a hole on the property without that. So that's one of the items that we'll have in the budget is the replacement of this river well. And there are a number of benefits that make it like a pretty obvious high priority target.
So the replacement that's in the replacement of the river well that's in the budget does not include the cost of purchasing an easement.
I just have I think we have $150,000 placeholder in there for all the costs.
For all the costs, so you're including that, okay.
Again, it was, we haven't begun the easement acquisition process or whatnot, but again, we have a decades long relationship with this property owner, and hopefully we can get past whatever the hiccup was a decade ago. No, it wasn't a situation where it would get off my property kind of thing. We've had issues since then over the past decade where we've had issues with the property, or not issues, but where we've accommodated the property owner would say, well, we've got homeless down there because there's a water tap. So we've locked things, we've locked power. It's really more of a nuisance issue with homelessness over the past decade, and probably not in the last year or two. I don't know, just if you've heard those kinds of issues. Not recently, I think we resolved them when the issue came up. They were using this facility as like a bathing facility, and there was a water tap and power. So
that's ag zone land, storing crap on it. Well, that's a violation.
I'm not gonna mention that when we go to get the easement, but,
We won't report you for. Sorry.
so what else, Justin, what else do you wanna cover on the water wastewater operations?
Yeah, those were the two big ones, the Plants River. You know, Plants number 4, Plants number 2, high arsenic, the long range plan of establishing another shallow well there to blend. Help us out with the arsenic and actually, and lend to production, you know, give us a little bit of room buffer with some of our other facilities, water facilities. You know, moving forward. And then just through the wet season, I mean, it was really trying. It has been for staff to deal with the flows coming into the treatment plant, collection system, treatment plant, lift stations, and then out to Selby. And I think my hope is, I'm optimistic, as Jeff was saying, if there's positive, we're turning a corner here. Flows have subsided coming to the treatment plant. Groundwater levels are subsiding. They're dropping down. And, you know, we hope we're gonna keep tracking it, and the more that we can get out to Selby, the better. Then we can finally prep all of the ponds for taking Nasi water and those sorts of things. So, but
Yeah, in the rain events, we briefed you thoroughly on what happened on January 9th, and nothing since then neared that or even close. But it was quite adventurous winter, probably like at your home and what you dealt with. It was quite adventurous. So
Well, hats
on
off
the-
to you and your staff, because you have to do it.
yeah, they're a good team.
Good to do. Awesome.
Yeah, they did a great job, and it really was a nice little test for the current configuration of wastewater plant too, in terms of how we were able to manage the wet weather flows, and really never got to a point of concern. In terms of, volumes of water, or we didn't really ever consider turning on the spray field or anything like that. So really, the ops team did a great job dealing with the conditions, and it was nice to kind of test the facilities. And the plan, and it works. Justin did a great job in this whole team. So that was great. And so the one other benefit, if you will, of this really long event season was our water use was really low until about May 3rd. But one of the things that didn't occur to us on May 3rd is that big jump. If that had happened in February or something, we would have caught it earlier, because it would have been alarming that the water use had jumped that significantly. So if this happened in February, it would have represented something like a 25% increase in water production. But in April and May, you're already seeing and predicting water production to go up, because people are activating irrigation systems. And so there was nothing alarming about the increase in water production. Oh, people are starting to water their grass and whatever. So it took a little while before we realized the impact like that. And my conversations with Mike's like, it was a kind of thing that could be really harmful to our wastewater system. I mean, it resulted in a 50% increase in flows in the wastewater system, from 400,000 gallons to about 600,000 gallons. It's very significant. And it was something that didn't even know happened.
Did you have like water damage, anything?
Well, the leak was inside a plumbing fixture or something, right? Like this, it all ended up in a sewer. If this was a plumbing rupture, like a broken pipe, it certainly would have been seen, because water would have showed up somewhere. But
It's like 200,000 gallons.
yeah, it's like 7 household swimming pools being dumped down the drain every day. It's really big.
So they should. I'll keep my mouth shut.
All right. Okay, if there's no more update on this item, we'll go ahead to the next item, which is update on the long range planning activities. I would say.
Yeah, Tina produced the report that we included right here. So I don't know if you'd like Tina to go through these items with you, or just ask questions about them.
I mean, if you could do some highlights, that would be good. So that would-
You wanna give her
Sure,
this?
I
She
think-
can- she can
I
pull
think
up.
that we talked a lot about some of the challenges that we're having right now in a lot of detail. And I think for the purpose of my report, we want us to step back and look at the big picture, long range planning. So part of what we'll do is take the time to update the water and wastewater master plans. And there's a lot of components that go into that. And so we've broken down the components into different parts, and then I just provided a little bit of a discussion for you on each of those. One of the things that we've been talking about for several years is the urban water management plan. So that's underway. That's something that'll come to your board relatively soon. They're taking a real in-depth look at the water supply and demand for a very specific timeframes. Will be from 2015 to 2020. And that's sort of a prescriptive requirement as part of the urban water management plan. And that sets up the formulas for the reporting moving forward for the district. And at least preliminarily, it looks like we're in very good shape for water conservation requirements that we'll need to meet. And so we'll take a look at that when we get those draft reports in, and we can review that. They'll also prepare a water shortage contingency plan, which for the district, in our case, will really take up most of those elements that we already have in our water code.
Yeah.
So we've already done some of that work for them. So that's the first item. Then we also looked at and have been doing updates on the water and wastewater atlases. That hasn't been updated for quite some time, but now we've got the new elements of the force main and all of the developments that have been coming online since 2010. Those are all updated in the atlases. The next step then is to actually update the water modeling and the sewer modeling, so that we can look at the water demand on the water side and the water collection on the wastewater side, and really test the system in that virtual model. So those are underway. The water model update is a little bit further along. We'll be doing some actual calibration testing coming up in the next few months, fire flow testing, to compare the actual pressures that we see in the field to what we're getting the results in the model from, or comparing those. And then we'll go through a similar process on the sewer side. And that'll be flow meters within the sewer system that we'll be comparing to the model. So that,
Is that the actual water being used, or is it the water assigned to each meter's potential highest use?
on the sewer side, or
Water side.
on the water side, we're looking at the actual demands, water demand. So we're looking
Okay.
at our billing and assigning the water use per parcel by parcel. So that's all built into the model. And on the sewer side, it's a percentage. So we're looking at the water, the zoning type and what a typical use is for commercial or for residential, and assigning a percentage of the water demand to run the model. So with that information, we'll be able to test what the current demands are on the system, what the deficiencies are, and then also look at projected water use and water collection demands on the system once we have the master plan population and growth projections. The next item on the list here is the wastewater treatment plant audit and facilities assessment. That's something that Justin just mentioned a little bit earlier. That would be a study that would look at our existing treatment plant, look at the changes that we made as sort of emergency measures to provide additional treatment, and see how we're doing compared to our permit and the restrictions. Then also look at what the impact of the general order would have on our plant. So it would do a complete evaluation of those two things, current and future. And then it would also look at some preliminary costs and some alternatives at a high level. That study then could be rolled into the wastewater master plan at a more detailed level. But this would give us a real good evaluation of what we have, what the capabilities are of the wastewater treatment plant. So those are sort of some of the background things that we can do before we roll into the master plan update itself. for the water and wastewater master plan update, we would need to update all of the general planning information, and that would be used for both the water and the wastewater side. We'd look at, you know, what the county planning general plan says in terms of growth to be expected. And consider things like population, growth analysis, and also the impact of the accessory dwelling units on our system. And so whatever, you know, as we're going through this, whatever else we could think of, we would discuss that and roll that into our master plan. So those would be the general planning information would be used for both the water and the wastewater side. And then we would do the detailed evaluation on the water and the wastewater. All of those elements and studies would be rolled into a discussion of the existing and the future system deficiencies, and develop a capital improvement plan and projects with cost estimates that we can do our long-range planning. I think that's the short version.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions?
So you'll see funding in the budget for the next steps of the master plan, and actually, this, we've spent some of those funds on some of the preliminary work that Tina talked about being accomplished, and then we've refined those estimates for that work, and unfortunately, that's resulted in some increased recommended funding to get this accomplished. The wastewater side is probably no longer optional.
Thank you. It doesn't seem like you're doing that much, so maybe we could add a couple of more things.
Sure. Plenty of bandwidth.
Well, thank you for the updates, appreciate it. All right, and okay, lastly, a review of the capital request for utility.
Yeah, I just thought, since you were here, I would try to go over some of the items that we have in the program in the budget for next year, so you could, you know, have kind of a running start on that, if you're up for it. There it is, I'm sorry. So a couple of, so this list is capital items that are in the water and wastewater budgets. Maybe one of the first things that we want to talk about is this tractor. We have an existing tractor. We did bring up a picture of it. We have an existing tractor that's used kind of everywhere with the district. It's a 1998
That's correct.
John Deere. And
The same one we brought up yesterday.
Yeah. So Naveen's got the background, but so its operational status is declining. Its attachments don't function anymore. The bucket is shaky, and it's 25 years old. And it doesn't really do any of its purposes ideally. It was sort of a middle ground. It was, you know, a middle-sized tractor that we asked it to do heavy work and light work, and it doesn't do either of those particularly well. So we're recommending on the utility side, selling that tractor and purchasing what Justin's calling a skip and drag. Maybe that's what the industry calls it. I'm not a tractor aficionado. I don't have a lot of expertise. They don't even let me drive them. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna learn to drive. I'm gonna drive that John Deere once we no longer need it. Actually, that's not, I have driven some friends' tractors, but I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, it's a much more industrial, heavy duty unit. This is what we rented, Justin, when we had to do the work out at Selby to bring that facility back up into service. So maybe just real quickly, that's its primary use. The thing that we just can't live without is the Selby maintenance, right? We need to keep Selby in top condition so we can continue to percolate that water. So that becomes its sort of primary use, but it can do other things. So this is going to be used for the maintenance of Selby. And Justin, it's going to be able to maintain a pond much using less man hours.
Oh, does this help with like sludge removal and things like that? Can it do that?
Yeah, so at my past employer, we had sludge beds, if you're talking about with drying beds specifically for like the treatment plant side. I mean, we do some removal of the contents in the ponds at Selby right now, whatever's dried kind of come through from Meadowbrook. We remove some of that material on an ongoing basis, but so that this would help maintain it at Selby, removing any sediments, anything that's come through from Meadowbrook and is kind of dried out. made
Kind of
like
solids, I
cake.
wouldn't call it
So like,
sludge,
how
but
about-
solids that.
Yeah,
But like, how about in future down the road? if
In
you
the
have
future,
to do
absolutely.
nitrogen removal,
Yeah,
nitrogen
yeah, this-
removal and things
No,
like that.
this won't, the sludge is gonna, this, you could move them, you could use something like this to move sludge around once it's on the ground, but this wouldn't be used to pump it out of the pond.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see, so it'd be a matter of, okay.
Well, right now, our technology would be pump it out of the ground, but if we go to a mechanical system, you'd have a different sludge.
Oh, okay, so I didn't know how to do that.
There's just one question, do we have enough money in the asset replacement fund, or would we have enough money to put money into the asset?
Yes.
Okay,
In water and sewer, we do, it's not a challenge.
it's not a challenge.
Right, but this is not a cheap piece of equipment. And when it comes with the proper attachments for treating Selby and probably for maintaining some of our larger sites with like a disc or a large mower, this is like a ballpark figure. I didn't bring the figures
I
with
think
me.
we programmed like 125. That was with it, some of those attachments that you were just mentioning.
It's not a
It's a larger.
it's not an inexpensive piece of equipment.
What?
I said it was probably 50,000 3 years ago.
It does kind of
Well, it's not
along the
a million,
lines
like,
of improving our efficiencies. Yesterday, we had some of those conversations with staff time. This does lend to userability and more efficiently and more often, it would allow our staffs to get in there and get the job done in Selby and around the treatment plant and well sites, on an ongoing basis.
Probably would take less time to get your job done.
That's it.
Yeah, much more, much larger piece of equipment than what we're working with today. So that's that. I'll minimize this so you're not focused on the tractor. And then we've got,
Service truck.
yeah, so we programmed in the replacement of one service truck this year. Unfortunately, the vehicle availability became very limited. We weren't able to get into the fleet orders. And even though we were able to find a kind of a more of an emergency replacement for the parks truck locally at a competitive price, we haven't been for the truck that we programmed last year. So those funds are reprogrammed for next year, same truck. And then there's one other vehicle, service vehicle, that is recommended for replacement. And it's actually a little heavier duty vehicle. It has a small crane on the back that we use to pick up pumps out of wet wells and potentially other heavy items. I say crane, that's probably hoist. Maybe it's a better boom, something like that. It's not a crane, but it's anyway, it's more than I could pick up. And that vehicle is equipped with this, and that vehicle is recommended for replacement. So its replacement cost is a little bit higher. I think about $80,000.
Yeah, I think we programmed $85,000 in there for that hoist truck. It pulls pumps like, for instance, at Grenache in the vineyard area, high school lift station, Rossi lift station on, for example.
So that's the second truck. We talked about the Platts River well earlier. We talked about the water and wastewater master plan next steps, which are again are funded. We talked already about the completion of the urban water management plan. That item is fully funded this year, but it won't be complete until early next year. So we've moved some of the same money from this year to next year. That's not new money. Eye wash stations, we're required to have eye wash stations anywhere we have chemicals. And we found that some of the ones that we have now are not properly operational. And so Justin's recommending replacing those everywhere. All of them would be replaced.
That's correct.
Locator, that's a utility locator.
Oh, no, raising the.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is pretty simple. So when in an ideal world, the county would coordinate with us and tell us in advance where they're gonna go do street projects, and then we can choose to coordinate the raising of the utilities along with that project. You might remember on Main Street, we knew this in advance and we hired a contractor to raise the utilities to coincide with that work. so that when it was all said and done, our utilities were at grade and accessible to us. This past fall, the county like gave us 2 days notice that they were gonna repave Vineyard and a bunch of other projects. And didn't give us a chance to coordinate. And so right now, we still have, we have a number of utilities that are buried under asphalt. In some places, the county was able to just work around the utilities, and you see that, right? You'll hit it like what feels like a pothole, but it's been done intentionally by the county. That was not at our request or call. And our access for valve covers and manhole covers are available, but maybe half or a third of them are just paved over. And we have 2 things we could do. One, we have, if these are low traffic areas, we can raise these ourselves, you know, one at a time and bring the manhole up to grade, fill with concrete, replace the manhole ring in the manhole. But on busy streets, that's our crew is not proficient enough to be able to operate safely. And so we're gonna wanna, in some locations, we're gonna wanna bring a contractor to do that work. I think you've identified X number of locations.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're split between water and wastewater. I think in that split, 12,000 was gonna be assigned to wastewater, 18,000 to water, for a collective of 30,000 to raise those utilities, get access again.
So on the areas where the manholes are covered, you guys have ways to know it.
Metal detector.
Oh,
You're not
Yeah.
surveyed yet?
Are they surveyed like on GPS or something? Yeah, we have that. We don't have like equipment to.
But the county didn't locate them?
Oh, no, they locate them. They just pave right over them. That's the.
Right, but did their plans show where they're located to?
Do they provide us with plans at that level of detail?
We'll find it. We know where they're at. Usually when they're initially paving over them, they'll put markers up to the side of the pavement to, as indication.
No.
We know where the lids are. It's just unfortunate. We had a lack of communication.
It's not really changing. It's just that there's in the interim, like, let's say we had an emergency today. And we needed to access a manhole cover into the sewer system. It would be like get a jackhammer out, bust the road up and.
But is it manhole cover designed to release gas and things like that? Or is it just for access?
Mainly it's for access. Depending on the style of lid, it can release different gases. You're right, but it's mainly access to be able to make.
Okay, so so it's not, okay.
This,
Locate.
yeah, the locator. Is a device that's used for. Locating underground utilities, and ours is out of date. This is a better technology. It's, I think it's like $4,000.
Yeah, well, I can't remember if we programmed maybe, I can't remember if it was in that $5,000-6,000. But absolutely, this would be able to pinpoint, be able to mark for any excavations that are being had in Templeton. They're requesting us to go out and mark our utilities. We'd be able to identify, locate that particular, our utility within their work site in a much better accurate way.
Is that only within the right of way, or do you go on to site of the property?
You could go anywhere you would like to. Yeah, absolutely.
This is something that we would use nearly daily.
Yeah.
USA requests is a very common.
Yeah.
Part of what we do. And then I'm gonna leave, but if you guys can talk about the bar screen issue and the grenache and those items, I'm gonna try to head out.
Yeah,
Plane to catch.
safe travels.
Go for it.
If I'm back, it's because I missed my flight and I don't get to spend the weekend with my mother.
He accidentally missed.
Have fun.
Okay, thank you much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yes, see you on Wednesday.
Okay. Happy Memorial. Yeah, so as far as the bar screen replacement goes, we obtained a bar screen Parkson AquaGuard some years ago from the city of Paso Robles as they were upgrading their headworks. I believe it's my understanding that
It was a gift from the city of Paso Robles.
So anyways, we're just at a time and place where the staff noticed the screen is worn and it's not taking the non-organics out of the system as it is designed. We had the rep come out, to the site and look at it and evaluate it. And we received some costs to replace and it's not the frame and the motor, all of those large components, that's all staying. It's just replacing the interior kind of feel, the rakes and so on and so forth in the inside within the framework. And so that we can continue to remove non-organics as it's designed. And also, we have an opportunity by replacing it to make the diameter a little bit smaller within the screen field, so that we could possibly not too much smaller, but just enough where it would encourage just a little bit more of that material to be removed and get it off into the waste, rather than have it migrate through the rest of our treatment plant and take up valuable space for treatment. And so then that's what those costs, I think, if I remember right, were right around $35,000, and that's replacing all of that interior within the frame of that Headworks bar string. Yeah. And
And then the last one, Grenache pump.
yeah, so we've had recently in the last couple of years, we've had some pumps go out at Grenache lift station. And so we are operating right now just fine, but we're down. We don't have any backup pumps now for Grenache, and one of them is pulling much higher amps than the other. And so we'd like to purchase a new pump for Grenache. They're about $7,000 is what they cost. Along with that, the control system out there was modified over the years, and oftentimes when I call the manufacturer, a lot of what is there is no longer manufactured or is available for replacement. There's just no replacement parts. An electrician set up a temporary level control system at Grenache right now that it's operating through, and we're getting by, but we need to kind of reestablish good controls level indication at the station, so that we maintain operation through flows and those sorts of things, elevated flows. And so this is a $7,000 for a pump replacement. It's $15,000 for the programming and level control modifications at that lift stations. So it's a combined $22,000, and you're replacing a pump and you're replacing some of the controls out at the site. Keep it kind of, operating. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, we gotta do that.
Does the Grenache pump station only service what is called, the vineyards?
So in here.
Yeah, Vineyard Estates.
Yeah, I believe, yeah.
Just there, okay.
Any other questions? All right, before actually we go to the last item for future agenda items, one question I had, maybe, I guess I need to go back to the update on the water and wastewater operations. I was gonna ask you, do you have any updates on the smell on the, Bennett and Los Tahoes there?
Yeah, Avoqua and getting the bioxide system up and running. There are some updates. I wish I could report to you that the system is up and running right now. Yesterday, the tank was delivered. It was custom made up in Fish Camp, and it was delivered yesterday. We received all the controls, all of the ancillary parts and components, and their team is. So I reached out again last night for the startup date. That's where we're at. They come in a 2-day period. The first day they install all those ancillary components, and the next day they fill up the tank and you're performing startup. They will test through the collection system to make sure that they're dosing in a proper level to meet the demand. And have a little residual, but I do not have a start up date right now. I'll have that very soon. But we have all of the parts, pieces, components either on site or at Meadowbrook right now, just waiting for that startup date.
Hopefully we can get it done soon before,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, this snow, so we can.
That's right.
Thank you for that. Any question?
No.
Good. All right, so the last item is future agenda items. Do you guys have any?
I have a question. The access out to the sewage place, sometimes that we have trouble with the neighbors,
Right.
is that calm down for future agenda? I mean, discuss that, what's happening with that?
Yeah, that's brought up, that's been brought up here and there ongoing, but I will say that it's recently been quiet. As far as from the property owner, we put up, I don't have any permanently installed delineators, but there are some delineators out there to try and pinch down traffic right before his property. So to encourage people to slow down before they even come from Meadowbrook, coming across his property and leaving. There are speed bumps, a couple of speed bumps, I think, through his property, just before. But, you know, he was upset with, people going through there up until about 6 months ago. It was a real issue about 6 months ago again. But the last 6 months have been pretty quiet. I spoke to him on Monday and he was thankful for us closing the gate. We close the gate as we go. Every time we open it up when we go in the morning, we close it at night. Same thing for the weekend. Our on-call staff open it and close it on the weekend as well. So haven't heard anything recently from the neighbor there.
Do we have legal access or is it a prescriptive right, or do you not know?
I would hate to comment on that. I've been in some meetings. Jeff would have much more.
Okay,
It's a
Knowledgeable.
dedicated easement.
See,
oh, it is a dedicated easement, okay.
there's some of the contentious points were who has the neighbors there allowing certain people to go through the property and then walk down our easement road, our road access to Meadowbrook, and others they were not allowing. And then a lot of focus came on just everybody going in and out of the side of their property.
And our easement's probably pretty specific to our use, I'm assuming.
It's
But-
just on the map, but it's an easement specific to the district's wastewater treatment plant.
Right, so other people shouldn't be on it then.
Right, and I think that was part of their concern. They wanted to have that closed down by us and wanted us to control that public access, but that wasn't really our role.
That's all.
So for I guess for the future agenda items, I get as things change with the Meadowbrook permit applications, how things are moving forward, that always should be an item on the future. And then obviously the water and wastewater master plan. And then the modeling and things like that. So as you guys get more updates, we could maybe meet then again in a couple of months. Perfect. All right. Any other question? All right, awesome. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.